Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, everyone. I like being called a guru. I haven't been called a guru before. I'm James Bond at the University of Maryland. I'm an assistant director in the Office of Student Conduct, and I oversee our academic integrity process. And in my role, I speak with a lot of faculty and instructors about, about allegations of academic misconduct and what they should do and what are their liberties in doing and addressing it. At our school, we have a code of academic integrity, and it spells out our process. And we've had challenges to it in a few different ways over the years. So what I'm sharing right now, I have is a few scenarios. I'd like to go through some scenarios with you. Everybody can see the PowerPoint or the, okay.
Can you put it on show mode better?
Actually, I have a better idea. Give me one sec.
Okay.
I'm gonna stop sharing that, and I'm going to share instead. I'm going to share that instead. Give me one sec. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
Here I was thinking I was at a varsity Zoom level person, but I'm still at JV, I guess. Here we go. All right.
We all are. Don't even worry about it.
All right, here we go. So I'm going to go through some scenarios, and each scenario comes with just a series of discussion points. So I'd like to have thoughts, questions. I'd like this to be a discussion, and then we'll end with some takeaways, just reminders to include. I recognize that the system we use at Maryland is different than the systems used at other schools, at other schools in the system, and I know there's some similarities and some stark differences, but we'll talk about that too. First scenario. A student submits an assignment you suspect that contains elements of academic dishonesty, plagiarism, use of unauthorized sources, etc., and you give the student a 0 on the assignment. This is what a lot of instructors want to do, and a lot of instructors do. Sometimes they talk directly with the student before they do it. Sometimes they don't. And I think, so I'd like to kind of flesh out some of the potential repercussions here. When you see this, what do you think are the potential issues that could lead to some liability issues?
It could appear to be arbitrary in that not every single faculty might do exactly the same thing.
Sure.
I was under the impression that as long as it's in your syllabus, you're protected and justified. And you're right, it would have to be something you did consistently.
Yeah.
Our academic integrity policy is actually quite explicit at Towson about what steps you have to take, and you definitely have to confront the student first before taking any action, and question them about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's an interesting point, Jay, because the question of confronting the student is, a question of due process, and how you confront the student is if you immediately come in and say, this has been plagiarized, or this you used unauthorized sources, this is what I see, and you're expecting them to react. Mm-hmm. And the question is, have you already made the decision? And if so, the student hasn't gotten any input. And this is one of the potential repercussions. And the reason for that, and I think James will explain a little bit about it, is that as an employee of a public school, due process is absolutely mandatory in everything you do. So James will elaborate a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, you all hit some very poignant points, and the fact that if it's done, if you're doing it without that discussion, yes, it can be seen as arbitrary, and the student could bring a grievance against the instructor for arbitrary grading, and that due process that that Elizabeth spoke about. You know, as state actors, we have to ensure that students have that. And the word confront is a tricky one because most of us are, you know, don't like confrontation. But it's important that the student have the ability to respond to the allegation, be it directly with the instructor, or if there is some formalized process that your institution uses, then to use that. It's sometimes not, people might not want to use it because it might take too long, or they might not like the way the process is, you know, spelled out at their institution. But it's still really important that if you do have a process, that it be used, and then and that whatever process you use to address it, there should be something in your syllabus about it, and not only that it's in there, but it's discussed routinely in the course. Often syllabi are talked about, you know, first day of class and, you know, more in the first week, and that's it. But especially when you have these major assignments, it's important to talk about the way academic integrity is and the way assignment should be addressed in the class, what academic dishonesty looks like for this particular assignment. Because if you have an issue with a particular assignment, you can say, well, this is what we said in our syllabus, because that is the contract that the student will use to challenge. And so it is, the syllabus can be your best friend, but it can also be, you know, a challenge if you don't have something spelled out in your syllabus about it.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
I just had actually it was last semester, and since we're all on Zoom and everything, you know, I suspected a student of cheating and asked for a conference, and the student put me off. He essentially said it wasn't possible at this time. There were family issues, and put me off for several days. And I talked, you know, I had multiple people, probably about 3 or 4, that I suspected that. And I talked to everyone else, and, you know, they basically had a reasonable explanation for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I now suspect that this particular student who put me off then talked to everyone else and figured out, well, what explanation will he take?
Okay.
And then, of course, when I finally did actually confront him, he accused me first of having already decided, you know, what was going on, what I was going to do about this. It was just a very nasty sort of confrontation.
Sure. And addressing these concerns in the universe of Zoom is particularly challenging. And we also have issues of students putting us off and putting us off. And it can get, you know, ugly. But if you are firm in your suspicion that that something was amiss, you know, you are, and this is where, you know, your discretion as the professor and as the instructor for the course, you know, you can say, I am, you know, not going to grade this assignment, and there will not be a final grade for the course until this matter gets resolved, or at least addressed. And yeah, we often have students who, especially, and that's one of the for other scenarios, is if there's a group case, a case of several students involved in some sort of suspicious behavior, you know, you can't help that they're talking with each other. They're on some group chat, you know, saying like, what's going on here? Or we've seen evidence of things on Reddit sites where students are, you know, talking about it and getting input from, you know, the universe. And at the end of the day, you know, you have to look at what, you know, the information that you have. I think it's also important to think about the standard of evidence that you use to make that determination. Like if you ultimately find a student responsible for a violation, and making sure that whatever is, you know, however it's decided, that there's a clear explanation to that point that the student can then can look at. So they don't see it as, you know, you are going against them. Students are going to take it personally. I just came from a preliminary interview with one of our students about an allegation, and you know, it's important for the student to see from an objective point of view, this looks suspicious, and it's going to be looked at. And, you know, if there is going to be a, you know, someone making the decision on this, it's important that whoever that third party might be, if it is a third party, that they can see at least the evidence that's been presented. Again, from an objective point of view, is pretty solid. I don't know if that answers your question, but I can appreciate the frustration that student is trying to, you know, prolong the process to hopefully make it go away. But if you're steadfast in trying to hold the student accountable.
Well, he succeeded. He basically challenged me so much that I felt it was not worth bothering with. And I had his test and a website, and they were virtually identical, right next to each other.
So when it comes to something like that, I think that actually goes into one of our other, and let me ask this, is there a, I see that you're at Towson, is there a, like a process, that like a university process, or is this something handled within the department?
The student would be able to appeal to my chair, and actually I had already brought it in front of the chair and said, what are you going to do about this if he, you know, appeals? And he said, well, if he says, you know, if he says this, then probably, you know, I wouldn't consider it cheating. And if he says this, then it probably is. So I already knew what the chair would essentially do. And, you know, the student pretty much figured out what he had to say in order to, I still think he cheated. I mean, to this day, but I also think he got away with it.
Yeah.
I think, Jay, I appreciate this, and it does bring up a lot of the issues, but I think we need to move along a little bit in terms of what we're doing here.
Yeah. Mr. Bond, I have a tiny question I put in the chat also.
Yeah.
Slave
log. Okay. A lot of times syllabus may not have space for all legal policies, how you weigh catalog or student's handbook. So I understand that. You know, I think a good way to approach that is, instead of putting it all in the syllabus itself, if you have maybe reference it, like basically most syllabi are online now anyway. So if you can if you put like a link in your syllabus to something else, in terms of space, you're saying like, if you have concerns about, if we suspect academic misconduct, this is the process we plan to use, and then it links to something out that might be a something that you can do. Is there a judicial board at UMB? We have, and at the University of Maryland, we do have an honor council that will address cases like this, and so that is a part of our process. I'm happy to share our code with folks after this meeting. Let me move on to the other scenarios, but Jay, what you mentioned, you know, those potential repercussions, you know, I talk about, you know, the rules or policies that justify the decision. You know, we talk about how things could be prevented. These are all just larger questions that you want to have with your department about how to prepare for the potential of being presented with academic misconduct.
Students can appeal all the way up to there's a committee of academic standards. So there are multiple levels of appeal.
Sure. Okay. Okay. The group, for scenario 2, group assignment is submitted where one section is clearly purchased, and there's one grade for the entire group, so the whole group fails. This is another tricky thing where you have a lot of students contributing, and but there may be only one bad actor. And I've seen this approached in different ways, because now you have many students who are on the hook for something that they may not be, you know, responsible for. Again, it speaks to having a clear when having an assignment like this, it's good to have a clear process that you use to, when you're holding students accountable, make sure students know, is it one grade or can students be graded individually? You know, when it comes to grading, there is some discretion the instructor has. So if you think that if the assignment can in some way be individualized, and it's clear who the student is that's, you know, at fault, there may be a way to do that, but you're going to want to make sure that that you spell out your process or your approach with all the students involved, because you may have the more students involved, you might have potentially have more students, you know, challenging the decision that you're going to make. When we've had cases like this at Maryland, or at College Park rather, we've had, you know, first we need to make it clear who is in the wrong. And then we talk about it with the instructor to talk to them about the approach that we're going to take, and also to determine, was there a way of checking this work before it was submitted? And because often with group work, no one's really checking each other's work. Everybody's just turning in something for the instructor to look at. These cases can get messy because of all the different people involved. And you want to make sure there's some consistency between the students and their explanations. Would it help to approach group grading by instead grading each student's draft submission to the final project so that it holds each student accountable for their, this is this scaffolded approach is also a good way to, at least to help determine whose work is genuinely whose. I like to show their work in a wiki. So are you talking about just where everybody can show their different contributions? I think it's Susan was saying that.
Yeah, this is Susan Antal. Actually, if they're writing a paper, they can draft it in a wiki.
Yeah.
And put all of their citations in there, and that way we know who did what part of it, especially when they divide it up as sections. Sometimes they go in and edit each other's sections, but wiki leaves a trail for that, so we know who did what. And I've been using wikis a lot more right now, especially for group work in my online teaching.
That's great to hear. And often students will, with group cases, it might take us a little bit longer because we're talking with all the students trying to ascertain who did what. And so if you have something like that, and often students will show, we can show you how we approach this. So that was good. I'm going to skip down to the takeaways because I know that we are, we're less than 10 minutes away, and then we can go back to some of the other scenarios. But these are some things that we want to make sure that you know about. First, know what rules exist at your institution. And if the rules don't exist, consider the philosophy of your institution. Some schools may not have a flushed out procedure, or some folks may not know what that procedure is. So I think it's always important to know, especially as new instructors come on or adjunct professors come on, this is the process that we use to investigate academic dishonesty so that everybody's on the same page. You may have some instructor that, may not be aware of what's going on or what the process is, and that could lead him or her into some issues there. So make sure that you have that conversation in the onboarding of those new instructors.
Right. James, can I add something here?
Yes,
I'm going to talk like the lawyer that I once was, the litigating lawyer. Make sure that you know your rules, your processes, and your procedures. And I mean, really know them. Don't, because what happens is if you don't know them and you act outside those, you are going to be held responsible for knowing them. And if there's a grievance against you, or if you're in a situation where they actually sue you because whatever decision you made has affected their career, going forward, you have some evidence. If you don't understand them, those rules were there, and there are cases out there. I've just read a few of them, and there are cases out there where you didn't know the rule and you acted outside of it, then you are responsible. So I can't emphasize that enough. Know and understand what the rules are. And if the rules don't exist, then yeah, consider your philosophy. But it might also be like James has said, go to those people that you know are the gurus. Go to the people that are dealing with this process. Go to your department, and whatever you do, document yourself and what you're doing.
Jay's asking a question by liability. What do we mean exactly by liability? Ultimately, we're talking about, you know, a potential, for lack of for a legal term, like a cause of action. Somebody might have a complaint against you and the way that you are, you know, handling their situation. And so, and if you are not in, if you're not in compliance with whatever your university's, you know, process or policies are, you could be at risk. They could, you know, you don't have a, you know, a strong foundation in which to respond to that complaint. So it may.
They're gonna sue for damages. Okay, we'll talk money, we'll talk reality. They're gonna sue the university for damages, but they're gonna sue them through you. Okay, and the university then, I mean, or they can file a grievance against you. And that, of course, is something that the university, what action they take will be defined by what happens in terms of the Maryland regulations, codes, or whatever it is that the action's about. But legal liability means just that. And, you know, people will say, well, we work for the state, so I have immunity against what I do. The state is, you know, the state has immunity. But one of the major exceptions to this and will allow people to sue in a, we call it a tort action, or an action that requires a duty on behalf of you, of your performance. One of the exceptions is the idea that you have discretion. And these matters are purely discretion. There's no doubt about that. So that exempts you and makes you open right then and there. Anyway, here's the lesson on law.
I'll skip down. So we talked about the syllabus, and you know, if you have something in your syllabus, just be sure to follow what's in your syllabus. It might mean a more drawn out process, but again, if you're saying this is what you're going to do and then you go against that, you're leaving yourself open to, you know, being sued because you're going outside your process. You know, and point number 4 about having a larger conversation across your department is important too, because if different professors are treating cases differently, then, you know, students will bring that up, even from semester to semester. So it's important to be as consistent as possible, not only with all of the students in your current class, but as again, over the course of time as well. It's okay if processes change, but if they do, again, you want to put people on notice. This is what our process is, and this is the way this is how we're moving forward. And then finally, just document everything. When it comes to lawsuits, everything that you have in running, you're more protected if you can show, you know, the evolution of, say, the conversation with a student. You know, if you're having a, you know, even the notes that you take might come into question, but anything that you have documented will be very helpful here. So it's just always helpful to have those things in writing. If you're working with university counsel, or if you're working with, you know, with anybody helping you address the concern, always good to have things in writing to show them, like, this is the evolution of this is the chronology, and this is how you've approached it.
Can I add one more takeaway?
Yes, please.
Please understand how to use those tools like Turnitin that work on the concept of authenticity. If you don't know how to evaluate a Turnitin report, you're putting yourself, you're using it as evidence you're putting yourself in bad position. So understand those tools. If you're proctoring an exam, if you're, you know, any of these things, understand how to use them, especially if you're using this evidence.
Yes, these are evolving. These websites, these technologies, especially over Zoom. I mean, they've evolved so much. Some websites will help you and provide you with information in terms of who's using your work. I wish I had a little bit more time, but I have to jump onto another call in a couple of minutes. I'll give the example of Chegg.com. Chegg is a company that students will go to for tutoring, for flashcards, but for cheating as well. Students can type in a question on Chegg, and there's some expert that will provide an answer to that question. And the challenge is that professors might suspect, wow, a lot of my students have the same wrong answer. If you go to Chegg and you see your question or a portion of your assignment is on Chegg, Chegg is a company that will give you that information. They will tell you who accessed your work, who posted your work, and they'll give you a lot of information. And students might think that information, it's like their username, their email address, even the IP address, if it's accessible before it's been taken down. So this isn't private information. This is a commercial company. So they will, you know, they have their own protocol as to how they will assist in these investigations. So it's good to be mindful of that and to have that conversation again across your departments so that everybody understands this is just an example of the different types of sources that are out there. So yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think I would just add one other thing with that, and that is you probably should be fairly vigilant. I don't know that there's any case law out there or anything to support it, but it would seem to me that if you know, the question here is how much responsibility do you have in these matters? How vigilant do you need to be about knowing about all these organizations, and you know, how far do you go in checking, is there contract cheating in my class? Is there, you know, by contract cheating, by the way, we mean when they purchase if someone comes in instead, that's, you know, goes in your position instead, they're contracted to do the work for the student. There's also the idea of purchasing papers and things of that nature. So, the point here is, you know, how vigilant do you have to be? And I don't know that there's any answer to that, but I would suggest that whatever it is, it's probably going to be increasing in terms of responsibility. So getting to know these sources, getting to know what is out there, you know, if your stuff is all over Course Hero, it may come to be that your responsibility is to go after them and make sure, you know, go to your school and ask them to issue a cease and desist letter or something like that. So the question is, how responsible do you need to be? And that's not open, that's open right now, but certainly needs to be in your thought processes.
I could talk about this forever and enjoy talking about it. So I know I have to leave now, but I look forward, if folks have questions, I'm happy to follow with folks individually in regard to just other pointers. Elizabeth, thank you so much for giving me a chance to share my thoughts.
James, thank you. And thank you for adjusting to our time frame. I really appreciate it. But you know, we'll probably have you back pretty soon.